Amara Johnson leaves her peaceful small town in Mississippi to pursue her dream in Chicago, believing that hard work will change her life. Instead, she becomes trapped in a restaurant that serves as a hideout for a human trafficking ring, where power strangles dangerous individuals. Beaten, but unyielding, she escapes and, along with a young civil rights lawyer, brings the truth to court. They mistake her silence for weakness. They are wrong. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe that Black people are always brave enough to defend their skin color and their lives, then this story is for you. Red Willow, Mississippi, woke up under a thin February sun. Soft light spilling over cotton fields like a quiet promise. The air was cool, but not cold, the kind of southern morning that smelled faintly of damp soil and laundry soap. A slow breeze moved through the pecan trees, and the town sounded the way it always did. A distant pickup truck, a screen door creaking, a dog barking once and then deciding silence was better. Amara Johnson stood on the porch steps of a weathered wooden house and stared down the road as if she could already see Chicago at the end of it. She was 22, tall enough to look confident even when she wasn't, with a lean, athletic build shaped by years of walking country roads and lifting whatever needed lifting without complaining. Her skin was a deep, warm brown that caught sunlight like polished wood. She wore her natural black hair long and loose today, brushed and tucked behind one ear the way she did when she wanted to feel city-ready. Her eyes, dark brown, steady, held a kind of hunger that didn't come from food. It came from the belief that life owed her more than small-town limits. People in Red Willow had always called her pretty, but it was the quickness in her that stood out, her sharp way of listening, her ability to read a room before she entered it, her stubborn refusal to laugh when men told her she should be grateful for attention. She had learned early that a smile could be a leash if you wore it for the wrong reasons. Inside the house, a sewing machine hummed. Ruth Johnson sat at a small dining table by the window, her back straight even when her shoulders clearly ached. Ruth was in her early 50s, medium height, slim in a way that suggested she fed everyone else before herself. Her face carried gentle lines around the eyes, worry lines that tried to hide behind kindness. She kept her hair short and neat, peppered with gray, and she wore reading glasses low on her nose like a habit she couldn't break. Ruth's hands were her language. They moved with practiced skill, threading a needle, smoothing fabric, fixing hems for neighbors who couldn't afford new clothes. She had raised Amara alone, and that kind of life carved discipline into her bones. Ruth was warm to others, patient with strangers. But with her daughter, she was honest in a way that sometimes sounded like harshness. That morning, she was sewing a seam on Amara's jacket, an old denim thing with a faded collar that had survived high school football games, church potlucks, and one heartbreak Amara never talked about. "You don't have to keep pulling at it," Ruth said, not looking up. "You'll stretch the thread." Amara stopped fidgeting and forced her hands to relax. "I just want it to look right," Amara replied. Ruth made a small sound, half sigh, half laugh. "You want your whole life to look right," she said. "That's the trouble." Amara leaned on the doorframe and watched her mother sew. She didn't say what she was thinking, that in Red Willow, right meant small. It meant marrying early, working a job that barely paid and pretending you were grateful because the alternative was admitting you were trapped. Ruth snipped the thread and finally lifted her eyes. "Amara." Her voice softened. "You have a plan." Amara nodded quickly as if speed could cover uncertainty. "I'll get a job, any job. I'll work 2 jobs if I have to. I'll send money back. I'll make it." Ruth studied her. A mother's stare could be gentle and sharp at the same time. "You talk like the city is a machine," Ruth said. "Put in work, get out a better life. But people run that machine, baby, people with teeth." Amara's jaw tightened. "I can handle people." Ruth's eyes flickered, something passing through them like a shadow. For a second, her hand pressed lightly to her chest, right above her heart. It was quick, almost unnoticeable, the kind of motion you could mistake for adjusting a necklace that wasn't there. Then she dropped her hand back to the table. Amara noticed anyway. "You okay?" Amara asked. "I'm fine," Ruth answered too fast, then forced a small smile. "Just tired. I didn't sleep much." That was one of Ruth's habits, swallowing pain and calling it tiredness. She had been doing it for months, ever since she started waking up breathless some mornings. She hadn't told Amara about the doctor's warning. Mild arrhythmia, watch your stress, come back if the chest tightness returns. In Ruth's mind, a mother's job was to hold the roof up, even if her arms shook. Amara stepped closer and placed a hand on Ruth's shoulder. Ruth's skin felt warm through her cotton cardigan. "I'll call you every day," Amara promised. Ruth's mouth twitched like she wanted to believe it, like she also knew life didn't always allow promises to survive. "You better," Ruth said, "and you better not be too proud to come home if you need to." Amara turned away to hide the sting behind her eyes. Home. Home was beautiful, but it was also a cage made of familiar faces. Outside, the town was already awake. Red Willow was the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business. The diner on Main Street would serve the same coffee it served 10 years ago, and the same men would sit in the same seats and talk about the same things. Amara had spent her childhood between cotton fields and church pews. She remembered chasing fireflies with bare feet, the sticky sweetness of summer watermelon, the sound of her mother singing quietly while ironing clothes. She also remembered the other sound, the one people pretended not to hear, the way opportunities seemed to stop at the edge of town for people who looked like her. She had learned to dream anyway. Chicago had become her symbol, the place where people didn't ask who your daddy was or how long your family had been around here. The place where she could become someone with money in her pocket and choices in her hands. She went to her small bedroom and opened her suitcase on the bed. It was old, scuffed, and held together by a strap that looked like it was tired of trying. She packed neatly, 2 pairs of jeans, 3 t-shirts, 1 dress she rarely wore, a pair of sneakers, a cheap phone charger, and an envelope with cash. $387, counted twice. When she reached for the envelope again, she hesitated. Money felt like courage until you realized how fast it disappeared. On her nightstand was a worn notebook. Amara flipped it open. The first page was filled with handwriting in tight, determined lines. Goals: get hired within 7 days. Save $1,000 within 3 months. Never sleep hungry. Don't trust smiles too quickly. She stared at that last line for a long time. It came from a lesson she learned at 17 when an older man from a nearby town promised her a modeling opportunity. It wasn't modeling. It was a hotel room and a locked door. Amara escaped because she broke a lamp and ran barefoot to the parking lot, shaking with rage and shame. She never told the police. She never told anyone. She just wrote, "Don't trust smiles too quickly." She closed the notebook and slid it into her bag. Then she picked up her phone and opened an app she had downloaded the night before. Her finger hovered over Create Account. She typed a username. Cotton to City. No photo, no real name, just words. She wrote her first post with trembling thumbs. Day 1. I'm leaving Red Willow. If you're out there feeling stuck, maybe we can be brave together. She didn't hit post yet. She stared at it. Then she pressed the button like she was stepping off a cliff. The screen refreshed. Her words were out in the world now, floating where strangers could see them. She exhaled. From the kitchen, Ruth called, "Amara, you eat something?" Amara walked back in and found her mother placing a plate of scrambled eggs and toast on the table. Simple food, made with the kind of love that felt like a blanket. Amara sat. Ruth watched her eat with eyes that were too bright. "You remember what I told you?" Ruth asked. About not trusting smiles? Amara said. No. Ruth's voice tightened. About keeping your head up? Don't let anyone convince you you're less. Don't let anyone make you feel like you have to earn basic respect. Amara swallowed. I know. Ruth reached across the table and placed a small folded paper into Amara's palm. It was a phone number written carefully. In Chicago, Ruth said, if you get in trouble, you call this woman. Her name is Mrs. Evelyn Price, church friend's cousin. She'll help if she can. Amara looked at the number, surprised. You've been planning, Amara murmured. Ruth's smile was faint. Mothers plan, she said, even when daughters think they're the only ones with dreams. A car horn sounded outside. Amara's heart jumped. The bus station rideshare had arrived early. Ruth stood and smoothed her cardigan, the way she always did before something important. She reached for Amara's jacket and held it up. Amara put it on. The jacket smelled like home, laundry soap, warmth, and a hint of fabric dust. They walked out together. The street was quiet. The sunlight had climbed a little higher, warming the boards of the porch. Across the road, a tall young man leaned against his truck like he had been there for a while. Caleb Morris. He was 24, broad-shouldered from farm work, with medium brown skin and short black hair that always looked like it had fought the wind and lost. Caleb's face was open and honest, the kind of face that didn't know how to hide what it felt. He wore a plain hoodie and work jeans, and his hands were shoved deep into his pockets like he didn't know what to do with them. Caleb had been Amara's childhood friend, the boy who used to race her to the creek and lose on purpose to make her laugh. As they grew up, he became quieter around her. Not cold, just careful, like he was afraid that saying the wrong thing would push her further away. A few people in town had expected Amara to end up with Caleb. He was good. He was steady. He was safe. But Amara didn't want safe. Still, when she saw him standing there, her throat tightened. You didn't have to come, she said, walking down the steps. Caleb's eyes searched her face, and he tried to smile. Yeah, he said. I did. He looked at Ruth respectfully, giving a small nod. Ms. Johnson. Caleb, Ruth replied, kind but guarded. She knew what lived behind his eyes. Caleb turned back to Amara. You really going? He said softly. Amara lifted her chin. I have to. Caleb swallowed, then pulled something from his pocket. An old silver coin, worn at the edges. My granddad gave me this, he said. Said it's for luck. I'm not big on luck. He hesitated, then pressed it into her hand. But take it anyway. Amara looked down at the coin. It was warm from his palm. Caleb, just take it, he said quickly, voice rough. So I don't feel useless. Amara closed her fingers around it. Thank you, she whispered. Caleb stepped back as if getting too close would make him say things he wasn't ready to say. The rideshare driver stood by the car, checking his phone. The trunk was open. Ruth hugged Amara first. The hug was tight. Too tight. Ruth's breath trembled against Amara's shoulder. You call me, Ruth murmured, every day. I will, Amara promised, and this time she meant it like a prayer. Ruth pulled back and cupped Amara's face with both hands, thumbs brushing her cheeks as if memorizing them. You are not alone, Ruth said, even if you feel alone. Amara nodded, her eyes burning. Then she turned to Caleb. He didn't step forward, but his body looked like it wanted to. Amara surprised herself by hugging him. Caleb froze for half a second, then wrapped his arms around her carefully like she was something precious he was afraid to drop. Be smart, he whispered. I am smart, she whispered back, and almost smiled. When she let go, Caleb's eyes were shiny, but he blinked fast and looked away. Amara walked to the car. The driver loaded her suitcase. She slid into the back seat. The interior smelled like air freshener and coffee. Through the window, she saw Ruth standing with hands clasped, trying to look strong. She saw Caleb a few steps away, shoulders tight, pretending he wasn't hurting. Amara lifted her hand in a small wave. Ruth waved back. Caleb raised 2 fingers in a quiet salute. The car pulled away. Red willow drifted behind her. Fields, trees, familiar houses, the church steeple, the diner sign. Amara pressed her forehead lightly to the window. A strange mix of emotions rose in her chest. Excitement sharp as electricity, fear heavy as stone, guilt like a slow ache. She rolled the coin Caleb gave her between her fingers, and she whispered, so quietly even she almost didn't hear it. Chicago. The highway opened ahead, and with every mile, the dream grew larger. Bright enough to blind her to the shadows waiting at the other end, Chicago did not welcome gently. It roared. The bus rolled into the city at dusk, and Amara pressed her forehead to the glass as skyscrapers rose like steel cliffs against a bruised purple sky. Traffic lights blinked endlessly. Sirens cut through the air in sharp streaks. People moved fast, coats swinging, heels clicking, conversations overlapping. The city didn't pause to breathe. It inhaled and exhaled ambition. For a moment, Amara felt small, not weak, just unanchored. When she stepped off the bus at the downtown terminal, cold wind rushed against her denim jacket, sliding under the collar and stinging her neck. February in Chicago was different from Mississippi. It didn't brush against your skin. It challenged it. She tightened her grip on her suitcase and told herself this was what progress felt like. The first 3 days passed quickly. She stayed in a cheap hostel near the station, sharing a narrow bunk bed with a thin mattress that sagged in the middle. The hostel smelled like detergent and exhaustion. People came and went at all hours, students, travelers, men who avoided eye contact. Money began to shrink faster than she expected. Meals cost more. Transportation cost more. Even breathing felt expensive. On the 4th day, she took a bus to the south side after seeing a handwritten sign on a community board advertising a room for rent. The neighborhood was louder, grittier. Brick buildings lined narrow streets, their paint peeling in quiet surrender. Graffiti crawled across alley walls. A train rattled overhead every 20 minutes, shaking the air like distant thunder. The boarding house stood in a narrow alley that smelled faintly of fried food and damp concrete. It was 3 stories tall, once painted pale yellow, now faded into something tired. The landlady, Mrs. Darlene Whitaker, opened the door. She was a heavy-set black woman in her late 50s, with warm brown skin and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her gray-streaked hair was wrapped in a patterned scarf, and she wore a loose sweater over leggings. She carried herself like someone who had seen enough of life to distrust charm, but still respected effort. "You got the cash?" she asked bluntly. Amara nodded. Mrs. Whitaker studied her for a long second, then stepped aside. "No drugs, no police at my door. Rent's due every Friday. You break it, you fix it. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." The room was small. Barely enough space for a twin bed, a narrow dresser, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. The radiator hissed loudly as if protesting its job, but it was hers. Amara handed over most of her remaining cash. When Mrs. Whitaker left, Amara sat on the bed and stared at the wall. The city didn't look glamorous from here. It looked close. Pressing in. That evening, she met her roommate in the shared kitchen. Lena Torres stood by the stove stirring a pot of beans. She was 24, petite and wiry with caramel-toned skin and dark brown hair tied into a high, messy ponytail. A small scar curved above her left eyebrow, a reminder of something she never talked about. Her eyes were sharp and alert, always moving. Lena dressed simply, hoodie, jeans, sneakers, but carried herself like someone ready to run if necessary. "You knew," Lena said without turning fully around. Yes. From where? Mississippi. Lena let out a soft whistle. That's far. Amara nodded. Lena finally faced her and gave her a quick once-over. Not judgmental, just assessing. You working? Looking. Lena's mouth tightened slightly. Be careful where you look. This city don't advertise its traps. Amara frowned faintly. What do you mean? Lena shrugged, turning back to the stove. Just mean what I said. Later that night, lying in bed, Amara opened her phone. Notifications blinked on her anonymous account. Cotton to City. A few strangers had commented. Simple encouragements, heart emojis, stories of their own moves to big cities. One message stood out. From North Star. Cities test people, but tests reveal strength. Keep your eyes open. Document everything. Amara read it twice. The profile picture was blank. No personal details. Something about the tone felt calm. Measured. Not dramatic, not flirtatious. She typed back cautiously. Who are you? The reply came an hour later. Someone who believes survival is strategy. Amara didn't know whether to feel comforted or unsettled. The next morning, she walked through downtown with a stack of printed resumes. Most restaurants weren't hiring. Some managers glanced at her and handed the paper back before she finished speaking. Others smiled politely and promised to call if something opens. By the sixth rejection, her optimism had begun to thin. Then she saw it. Velvet Rose Lounge. The building stood on a corner street lined with boutiques and upscale cafes. Its exterior was polished. Black framed windows, gold lettering, velvet curtains visible through the glass. Even in daylight, it looked expensive. A small sign near the door read, Now, Hiring. Inquire within. Amara hesitated only a second before pushing the door open. Inside, the air smelled like perfume and polished wood. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. The floor gleamed. Even empty tables looked staged for photographs. Behind the bar stood a tall white woman arranging glasses. Veronica Blake. She was 42, tall and slender with sharp cheekbones and skin so pale it almost glowed under warm lighting. Her blonde hair fell in smooth waves over her shoulders. She wore a long black dress that hugged her figure and split high along one thigh. Her lipstick was a bold red. Precise, deliberate. Everything about her was controlled. Her eyes were the coldest part. Steel blue, evaluating. Yes? Veronica's voice was smooth but edged with impatience. I saw the hiring sign, Amara said. I'd like to apply. Veronica's gaze traveled slowly from Amara's boots to her face. It was not admiration. It was appraisal. What experience? Veronica asked. Customer service, cleaning, fast learner. Veronica stepped closer, heels clicking softly. She circled slightly like someone examining merchandise. We are very selective here, Veronica said. Our clientele expects a certain atmosphere. Amara held her chin steady. I can work hard. Veronica's lips curved into something that resembled a smile, but felt like calculation. We only need kitchen support at the moment. Cleaning, dishwashing, no direct guest interaction. The pause before no felt intentional. That's fine, Amara said quickly. Veronica studied her another second, then snapped her fingers lightly toward the back. A thin, middle-aged man in a vest appeared. Mr. Carlton Hayes, the floor manager. He was white, balding, with narrow shoulders and permanently furrowed brows. His hands twitched slightly when he stood still, as if he carried constant nerves. Show her the kitchen, Veronica said. Carlton nodded stiffly. As Amara followed him through the dining area, she felt eyes on her. Two women at a corner table glanced up briefly, whispering. A man in an expensive suit watched openly, gaze lingering longer than comfortable. In the kitchen, the shine disappeared. Stainless steel counters, industrial sinks, harsh fluorescent lighting. The air smelled of grease and soap. "You start tomorrow," Carlton muttered. "Uniforms, black shirt and pants. No questions. You're here to clean." "Yes, sir." When she walked back out, Veronica was on the phone near the bar. Her tone had shifted. Lower, more intimate. "Yes, Councilman," Veronica said softly. "Everything's under control." Amara slowed for half a step. "Councilman?" Veronica's eyes flicked toward her instantly. The warmth vanished. The smile returned, but colder. "See you tomorrow," she said. Outside, the city air felt sharper. That evening, Amara told Lena about the job. Lena stopped stirring her food mid-motion. "Velvet Rose," she repeated quietly. "Yes." Lena's jaw tightened. "You sure that's where you want to be?" "It's good pay," Amara insisted. Lena didn't argue further, but her eyes held something like warning. Later that night, Amara lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She imagined steady paychecks, savings growing, a better apartment, sending money home. Her phone buzzed. North Star again. "Where did you apply?" Amara hesitated, then typed, "Velvet Rose Lounge." A pause. Then, "Be observant. Not everything polished is safe." Amara stared at the message, uneasy. She told herself she was overthinking. It was just a restaurant, just a job, just the first step. But as she drifted towards sleep, she couldn't shake the image of Veronica's eyes, measuring, calculating. And for the first time since arriving in Chicago, Amara felt something colder than wind. Not fear. A warning. She believed she had found her beginning. She did not yet understand what she had walked into. Amara's first week at Velvet Rose began in heat and steam. The kitchen swallowed her whole. Stainless steel counters reflected harsh white light. Industrial sinks roared endlessly. The smell of oil, bleach, and overcooked meat clung to her hair and clothes no matter how hard she scrubbed. Her shifts started at noon and were supposed to end at 9. They rarely did. During daylight hours, Velvet Rose operated like any upscale restaurant. Wealthy couples ordered wine. Businessmen laughed too loudly at polished tables. Waitresses glided across the floor in fitted black dresses, each one selected not only for efficiency but for appearance. Amara stayed behind the swinging kitchen doors. But she watched. She watched how Carlton Hayes, the thin, twitchy floor manager, became visibly tense every evening around 9:30 p.m. He would check his watch repeatedly, wipe invisible sweat from his brow, and whisper to Veronica near the bar. Carlton was the type of man who had spent his life obeying stronger personalities. His spine seemed permanently bent forward, not from age but from habit. Years ago, he had owned a small diner that went bankrupt. Since then, fear of losing stability had hollowed him out. He followed Veronica because she paid well, and because he was afraid of her. At 9:55 p.m., something shifted. The lighting dimmed slightly. Certain staff members were sent home early. Others, selected ones, remained. The first night it happened, Amara was scrubbing pans when she heard a metallic click from the back hallway. Curiosity drew her closer to the door that led toward the storage corridor. Through a narrow crack, she saw it. The rear entrance, previously locked, was being opened. 2 men entered. They wore tailored suits, dark coats, polished shoes that never touched the kitchen grime. They did not speak to the host stand. They did not wait to be seated. Veronica greeted them personally. Her smile was different at night, less performative, more strategic. The second night, the pattern repeated. By the fourth night, Amara understood that Velvet Rose operated in 2 worlds. After 10 p.m., the music changed. Slower. Heavier. The clientele changed too. Older men. Quieter. Guarded. Cars with tinted windows idled briefly behind the building. One evening, Carlton appeared in the kitchen doorway and stared directly at her. "Veronica wants you up front," he said. Amara blinked. "I'm on kitchen duty." "Not tonight." Her stomach tightened. She washed her hands slowly, buying seconds that did nothing. When she stepped into the dining area, Veronica stood waiting. Tonight she wore a deep crimson dress slit higher than before, the fabric catching light like spilled wine. Her lipstick matched the dress. Her eyes were unreadable. "You clean well," Veronica said smoothly, "but we're short-handed." "I was hired for kitchen work," Amara replied carefully. Veronica stepped closer. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with something colder. "You were hired to be useful," she corrected. "And tonight, useful means serving." A black tray was placed in Amara's hands before she could protest. The first VIP she approached barely looked at her face. He was heavy-set, mid-50s, hair silver at the temples, wedding ring gleaming under the chandelier. His gaze traveled slowly down her body like inventory. "New?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Amara replied stiffly. He smiled, not kindly. "Don't worry," he said. "You'll learn." Her skin prickled. As the night deepened, the request became stranger. Certain guests were escorted down a side hallway. Two of the waitresses, both young, both silent, followed. One of them caught Amara's eye briefly. Her name was Kiara Bell, 21, light brown skin, delicate features that would have made her look younger if not for the permanent tension in her jaw. Kiara had once studied nursing. Amara learned later, before financial strain pulled her out of school. She moved efficiently, but avoided direct conversation as if words were dangerous currency. Around midnight, Veronica approached again. "Table 6 would like private service," she said calmly. Amara didn't understand at first. "What kind of service?" Veronica's expression cooled. "The kind that pays your rent." Amara froze. "I'm not doing anything illegal," she said. Veronica's smile vanished completely. "Illegal?" she echoed softly. "Be careful with words like that." Carlton appeared behind Veronica, eyes darting nervously. "You're being dramatic," he muttered. "It's just hospitality." Amara stepped back. "No." The word felt small, but solid. The air changed. Veronica's voice dropped, losing all pretense of warmth. "You live on South Halsted, correct? Third-floor room. Mrs. Whitaker's building." Amara's heart slammed against her ribs. "How do you—" "You work for me," Veronica said. "I know things." Two men she hadn't seen before stepped from the hallway. One was tall and broad-shouldered with a shaved head and blank expression. His name, she later learned, was Marcus Doyle. Early 30s. Former security contractor. He moved like someone trained to restrain before speaking. The other, shorter but thickly built, had a scar across his chin and restless eyes. Tommy Raines, mid-20s, volatile temperament, quick to anger. They didn't grab her immediately. They didn't need to. "Go with Marcus," Veronica said calmly. Marcus placed a firm hand on Amara's arm. Not violent, not gentle. She tried to pull back. "Don't make this worse," Tommy muttered. They led her down the hallway she had seen others enter. The music grew muffled behind heavy doors. The corridor smelled faintly of disinfectant and something metallic. They stopped in front of a small storage room. Marcus opened the door. Cold air rushed out. It was a refrigerated storage unit. "Wait," Amara started. Marcus's face remained expressionless. "You just need to cool off," Tommy said with a smirk. They pushed her inside. The door shut. Darkness swallowed her. The cold bit instantly sharp against her lungs. She pounded on the door, shouting, but the music upstairs swallowed her voice. Minutes felt like hours. Her teeth began to chatter. When the door finally opened, light stabbed her eyes. Tommy stood there. "Ready to cooperate?" he asked. She lunged past him, but Marcus caught her shoulder and slammed her back against the metal shelving. Pain shot through her spine. "Stop fighting," Marcus warned quietly. She fought anyway. The slap came fast, from Tommy. Sharp, humiliating. "Don't act righteous," Tommy snapped. "You think you're better than the others?" The others. That's when she saw them. Down the corridor, a door half open revealed two girls sitting silently on a couch. One was Kiara. The other was younger, maybe 19, pale and trembling, blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail. Her name was Emily Shaw, new to the city, lured by a modeling opportunity. Her wide blue eyes looked permanently shocked. It clicked into place. Velvet Rose was not just a restaurant. It was a pipeline. The next nights blurred into forced compliance. She was ordered to pour drinks, to sit at tables, to laugh on command. When she resisted beyond a certain threshold, punishment followed. Verbal threats, physical shoves, another freezing confinement. She tried to escape once through the back exit during trash disposal. Marcus caught her before she reached the alley. The second time, she ran toward the front door after midnight, but Tommy blocked her path and twisted her wrist hard enough to bruise. "Third time won't be gentle," he hissed. Each failed attempt left her more battered, but not broken. Back at the boarding house, Lena noticed the bruises. "What happened?" Lena demanded one night, grabbing Amara's arm. "I fell," Amara lied. Lena stared at her too long. 3 days later, Lena didn't come home. Her bed was empty, her belongings gone. Mrs. Whitaker said someone had paid Lena's remaining rent in cash, and she had moved out suddenly. Amara's stomach dropped. At Velvet Rose that night, she overheard Veronica speaking to a man in a black tailored suit near the office door. He was older, perhaps in his early 50s, salt and pepper hair, refined posture. His name was never spoken aloud in her presence, but an envelope of thick cash passed discreetly between them. "I'll ensure zoning stays favorable," the man said quietly. "And I'll ensure discretion," Veronica replied. Amara lowered her gaze quickly, heart racing. That night, she sent a message to North Star. "This place is not what it looks like. Girls disappear. There are private rooms, cash exchanges, security guards." The reply came slower than usual. "Can you describe the layout? Entrances, cameras, names if possible." Her fingers trembled. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was observing, but survival still came first. That week, she attempted escape again, this time slipping into the alley while snow fell lightly, covering footprints. She made it half a block before Marcus tackled her to the ground. The impact knocked breath from her lungs. "Why do you keep trying?" he muttered, almost tired. "Because I'm not yours," she gasped. He hesitated. Just a second. Then he dragged her back. The bruises multiplied. The humiliation deepened. But inside her, something sharpened. They could confine her body. They could threaten her safety. They could even move girls like Lena across state lines. But they could not convince her that this was normal. Every time she was forced to serve, every time she was shoved into silence, she memorized faces, routes, timings. She did not surrender, not once. And as the lights of Velvet Rose glowed brighter each night, Amara began to understand that the shadows behind them were not accidental. They were engineered. She was trapped inside something far larger than a job. But even in captivity, she refused to let her will freeze. Winter dragged itself across Chicago like a tired animal that refused to die. Snow gathered in gray piles along the sidewalks, stained by exhaust and footsteps. Inside Velvet Rose, the seasons did not exist. There was only dim light, controlled music, and carefully timed transactions. Months had passed. Long enough for bruises to fade and return. Long enough for fear to evolve into calculation. Amara no longer counted days. She counted exits. She had memorized the rhythm of the building, the shift changes, the blind spots between camera sweeps, the way Marcus paused every 45 minutes to smoke near the loading dock. She had stopped reacting outwardly. Compliance had become camouflage. The 10th opportunity came unexpectedly. It started with smoke. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a thin thread curling from behind the bar's electrical panel. A wiring fault, subtle but dangerous. A bartender shouted. A glass shattered. The fire alarm did not trigger immediately. Someone had disabled part of the system months ago to avoid unnecessary inspections. For the first time since arriving in Chicago, chaos favored her. Carlton ran in circles, shouting half-formed instructions. Tommy swore loudly. Guests were hurried toward the main exit. In the confusion, no one noticed Amara slip toward the side corridor. Her heart pounded, but her steps were steady. At the end of the hallway was an emergency exit she had tested in her mind 100 times. It had been alarmed before. Tonight, with circuits compromised, the small red light above it blinked weakly. She pushed. Cold air exploded into her lungs. Snowflakes struck her face as she ran into the alley. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. Not for her, but for the building. Smoke was beginning to thicken behind her. She did not look back. Her boots slipped on ice as she turned onto Halsted Street. Traffic moved indifferently. People hurried past without noticing the girl in black running without a coat fully zipped. For 3 blocks, she expected Marcus's hands to slam into her shoulders. They did not. When she reached the nearest police station, a brick building with harsh fluorescent lighting in the lobby, her legs were shaking so badly she almost stumbled through the door. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and disinfectant. A middle-aged white officer sat behind the front desk, reading paperwork. His name tag read, Officer Randall Pierce. He was broad-shouldered with thinning blonde hair and tired blue eyes. Years on the job had carved skepticism into his expression. He looked up slowly as Amara approached. "I need to report a crime," she said, breathless. He gestured to a plastic chair. "Sit." She didn't sit. "There's a restaurant, Velvet Rose Lounge. They're trafficking women. They lock us in. They're private rooms. Security guards. Cash exchanges." Officer Pierce leaned back slightly, studying her face. "Do you work there?" he asked. "I did. I escaped tonight." "Escaped?" His tone shifted, not alarmed, but cautious. "Yes?" He tapped his pen lightly against the desk. "Do you have proof?" Her mouth opened. Proof. Bruises were fading. Cameras were inside the building. The other girls were still there. "I can tell you names," she insisted. "Veronica Blake, Marcus Doyle, Tommy Raines. There's a councilman—" Pierce's pen stopped tapping. "A councilman," he repeated. "I heard—" He raised a hand gently. "Slow down." Another officer approached, a black woman in her early 30s, Officer Jasmine Hill. She was tall, athletic, with closely cropped hair and observant dark eyes. Unlike Pierce, her expression carried less dismissal and more concern. "Everything okay?" Jasmine asked quietly. Pierce shrugged. "She says there's trafficking at Velvet Rose." Jasmine's gaze sharpened. "That place on West Monroe?" she asked. "Yes," Amara said quickly. "You know it?" Jasmine hesitated. "We've had noise complaints. Nothing substantial." "I was locked in a freezer," Amara said. "They move girls. One of them disappeared." Pierce's jaw tightened slightly. "Ma'am," he said evenly. "Accusations like this require evidence. If you're alleging human trafficking, that's federal jurisdiction. We can file a report, but without physical proof or another witness—" "I am a witness," she snapped. The room went quiet. Pierce lowered his voice. "I'm not saying you're lying. I'm saying it's complicated." Complicated. He handed her a form. "Fill this out?" She wrote until her hand cramped. Dates blurred together, details tangled in memory. When she finished, Pierce took the paper, glanced at it, and placed it in a folder. "We'll look into it," he said. It sounded rehearsed. Jasmine met Amara's eyes for a brief second, apology flickering there, but she said nothing more. Outside, snow continued to fall. 3 days passed. No call. On the 4th day, Amara returned to the station. Pierce was not there. A different officer searched through a stack of files. "I filed a report," Amara said, "about Velvet Rose." The officer typed slowly into a computer. "What was the date?" She gave it. He frowned slightly. "I don't see it in the system." "That's impossible," she said. "I filled it out right here." He checked again. "Nothing under your name." Her pulse roared in her ears. "It was filed," she insisted. He gave a small, tired shrug. Maybe paperwork got misplaced. Misplaced. Outside, the city traffic roared like it always had. That night, Amara sat on her narrow bed in the boarding house and stared at her phone. Bruises had turned yellow at the edges. The cold still lived in her bones. A message blinked from North Star. "You went to the police, it wasn't a question." "Yes," she typed. "They lost my report." A long pause followed. Then, "I need to tell you something. I'm an attorney. Civil rights and trafficking cases, I've been monitoring similar patterns across the city." Amara stared at the words. "Why didn't you say that before?" "Because people don't trust titles. They trust consistency." Her breath caught. "They're connected," Amara wrote. "The police, the councilman, the owner." Another pause. "That's possible," North Star replied. "Institutional protection happens. But accusations must be structured strategically." Structured. Amara felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. "I'm not a strategy," she whispered to the empty room. Her phone buzzed again. "Do not confront them alone again. Gather documentation if you can. Dates, times, anything. Gather." She had escaped. She had spoken. And still nothing had shifted. The next step felt impossible, but she refused to return to silence. 2 days later, she attempted to file a formal civil complaint through the city clerk's office. The building was large, bureaucratic, cold. She stood in line behind people arguing over parking tickets and zoning permits. When it was her turn, the clerk, a thin man in wireframe glasses named Harold Benton, barely looked up. "Complaint against a business?" he asked flatly. "Yes?" He skimmed her written statement. "You understand that defamation claims can result if allegations are unfounded?" he said. "They're not unfounded." He stamped something without expression. "We'll process it." Weeks passed. A notice arrived by mail. Complaint dismissed due to insufficient evidence. No hearing scheduled, no investigation initiated. Velvet Rose continued operating. Amara stood outside the restaurant one evening, across the street in the freezing wind, watching the entrance glow warmly as guests stepped inside. Veronica exited briefly, wrapped in a tailored coat, speaking quietly into her phone. Her posture was relaxed, untouched. A black SUV pulled up. The same silver-haired man from months ago stepped out. They exchanged a brief nod before entering together. It was not subtle anymore. It was protection. Back in Mississippi, Ruth Johnson sat in a small hospital room under harsh fluorescent lighting. Her skin looked paler than usual against the white sheets. A heart monitor beeped steadily beside her bed. Dr. Samuel Green, a calm, middle-aged black physician with gentle eyes and careful speech, stood at the foot of her bed reviewing charts. "You should have come sooner," he said softly. Ruth offered a feint. Chicago's early spring carried a deceptive softness. Snow had melted into gray slush and the air no longer bit the skin, but it still held a chill beneath the surface, much like the city itself. Amara sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at the message that had changed everything. "My name is Olivia Carter. I'm an attorney. If you're willing to fight, I'm willing to stand with you." They agreed to meet in person. The cafe Olivia chose was quiet and understated, tucked between a bookstore and a laundromat in a neighborhood far from Velvet Rose. It smelled of roasted coffee and old paper. Amara arrived first, scanning every face that walked in. When Olivia entered, Amara knew instantly. Olivia Carter was 27, tall and slender with poised posture that suggested discipline more than arrogance. Her skin was fair, with faint freckles across her nose, and her shoulder-length light brown hair was neatly parted and tucked behind her ears. She wore a navy-tailored coat over a charcoal suit, professional without being flashy. But it was her eyes that struck Amara most. Gray-green, sharp and observant, but carrying something deeper. Grief, perhaps. Olivia approached calmly. "Amara," she asked gently. Amara stood. "Yes?" Up close, Olivia's presence felt grounded, not theatrical, not performative. They sat. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," Olivia said, "about who I am." Amara folded her hands together tightly. "Why are you helping me?" Olivia held her gaze without hesitation. "Because 5 years ago, my younger sister disappeared." Her voice did not tremble, but it carried weight. Her name was Claire. She was 19. She moved to Milwaukee for what she thought was a modeling job. The place looked legitimate. It wasn't. Amara's throat tightened. "They moved her across state lines," Olivia continued. "By the time law enforcement took it seriously, it was too late." Silence settled between them. "I couldn't save her," Olivia said quietly, "but I can fight for others." For the first time in months, Amara felt something unfamiliar. Not fear. Support. Olivia opened a slim leather folder. "You were right," she said. "Velvet Rose has been flagged in internal reports before. Nothing concrete. No formal testimony that held." "Because they silence it," Amara said. Olivia nodded once. "Then we build something they can't erase." The plan unfolded carefully over the next weeks. Amara did not return to live at Velvet Rose, but she found temporary cleaning shifts there under the excuse of needing work again. Veronica allowed it. Control, she believed, was maintained through proximity. Olivia instructed Amara precisely. Observe patterns. Who enters after 10 p.m., license plates if possible. Timing of private room usage. Count staff changes. They communicated through encrypted messaging apps now. The first piece of evidence came accidentally. One night, while cleaning the private wine lounge, Amara noticed a small wall panel slightly ajar behind a decorative painting. Inside was wiring connected to a discrete camera system, one that recorded but did not stream to the main visible monitors. She took photos quickly with her phone. Olivia's response came within minutes. Hidden internal surveillance. That means they archive. The second breakthrough came through Kiara. Kiara Bell had grown thinner, her movements more mechanical. One evening in the hallway, Amara caught her hand gently. "There's a way out," Amara whispered. Kiara's eyes flickered. "You don't know that," Kiara said flatly. "I do." Kiara hesitated, then slipped a folded napkin into Amara's palm before walking away. Later, in the bathroom stall, Amara unfolded it. A list of initials. Dates, room numbers, VIP client list. The third piece came through Risk. Olivia provided Amara with a tiny recording device disguised as a lipstick tube. It was subtle, lightweight. "Only if safe," Olivia warned. One late evening, Amara placed it on a shelf inside the wine lounge. The audio captured muffled conversations, numbers discussed, delivery schedules, references to shipments. One voice was unmistakably Veronica's. Then came the image that changed everything. During a private event, the silver-haired councilman, identified by Olivia as Councilman Richard Halpern, 58, influential in zoning and licensing committees, was captured on video shaking hands with Veronica, while an envelope passed discreetly between them. Halpern was tall, lean, with sharp angular features and meticulously groomed gray hair. His public persona was polished and civic-minded. He spoke often about community investment and urban renewal. His reputation shielded him, but the footage told another story. Meanwhile, back in Red Willow, Caleb Morris sat at the old wooden kitchen table in his farmhouse, scrolling through Cotton to City. He had recognized Amara's writing style immediately, the rhythm of her sentences, the stubborn hope beneath them. Though she never named Velvet Rose publicly, the hints were clear enough. Caleb had grown broader over the months, working longer hours on the farm. His hands were rough, his jaw permanently set in quiet determination. He had always been steady, not loud. But when he read about exploitation disguised as opportunity, something hardened in him. He created a local fundraiser page anonymously. "Support survivors of urban exploitation," it read. Small donations began to trickle in from church members, neighbors, old classmates. He didn't tell Amara. He just prepared. Back in Chicago, pressure mounted on Olivia. At her law firm, Henderson and Bright LLP, senior partner Margaret Henderson called her into the glass-walled conference room. Margaret was in her early 60s, tall, impeccably dressed, silver hair swept back in a sleek style. Her voice carried authority shaped by decades in corporate litigation. "I've reviewed your extracurricular involvement," Margaret said coolly. "You're attaching our firm's name to allegations involving a sitting councilman." "It's evidence-based," Olivia replied evenly. "It's politically volatile," Margaret countered. "Clients are noticing." Olivia held steady. "Human trafficking is not political." Margaret's expression hardened. "Be strategic, Olivia, or be independent." It was not a threat spoken loudly, but it was clear. Olivia left the meeting knowing she might lose her position. That night, she called Amara. "We have enough to petition for reopening the case," Olivia said. "But once filed, there's no turning back." "I turned back once," Amara replied quietly. "It nearly killed me." They compiled everything: video footage, audio recordings, VIP list cross-referenced with public records, financial transaction patterns linked to zoning approvals. One more surprise surfaced during review. In the background of one video clip, a girl moving quickly past the corridor camera. Lena Torres, alive. The timestamp indicated she had been present 2 months after her move. Olivia froze the frame. "She was transferred," Amara whispered. "Not relocated." That detail shifted the case from exploitation to interstate trafficking. Federal jurisdiction. On a gray morning, heavy with rain, Olivia filed the formal petition in federal court. The clerk, a young Asian American woman named May Lin with sharp glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the documents carefully. "This is substantial," May said quietly. "Yes," Olivia replied. The petition was stamped, reopened. Outside the courthouse, Amara stood beneath the awning as rain fell in steady sheets. For the first time, she was not alone in the fight. She was not invisible. Velvet Rose still glowed at night. Veronica still smiled at clients. Councilman Halpern still attended public events. But something had shifted beneath the surface. This time, the record would not disappear quietly. This time, there were witnesses. This time, there was strategy. Amara exhaled slowly, rain dampening her hair, city noise swelling around her. She had found her ally, and together they had begun to fight back. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago rose like a monument of stone and glass, its tall columns severe against a pale spring sky. News vans lined the curb. Reporters adjusted microphones. Word had spread quickly once the petition became public and the councilman's name surfaced in court documents. Inside, the courtroom filled early. Rows of wooden benches creaked under the weight of journalists, local activists, curious citizens, and a few silent observers who had once walked through Velvet Rose's polished doors without knowing or caring what happened beyond them. The air felt charged, not loud, but tight, as though everyone sensed that something larger than one case was being examined. At the front of the room sat Judge Eleanor Whitman, 62, tall and slender with silver hair cut cleanly at shoulder length. Her posture was erect, her gaze steady and disciplined. She had spent decades building a reputation for procedural fairness and intellectual rigor. She was known for one trait above all. She did not tolerate manipulation inside her courtroom. Her expression rarely betrayed emotion, but those who appeared before her understood that she saw more than she spoke. On the right side of the courtroom sat Veronica Blake. She wore a cream-colored tailored suit, immaculate as always. Her blonde hair was styled precisely, her makeup subtle but deliberate. To the untrained eye, she looked like a successful businesswoman defending her name. But beneath the calm exterior, her jaw was slightly tighter than usual. Beside her sat her defense attorney, Thomas Avery, a seasoned litigator in his late 40s with slicked-back dark hair and a voice trained to sound reasonable under pressure. Avery had built his career defending corporate executives in regulatory scandals. He thrived in gray areas. Across the aisle stood Olivia Carter. She wore a charcoal suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back neatly. There was no theatricality in her presence, only focus. Her file folders were organized with color-coded tabs. Months of preparation rested inside those pages. Amara sat beside her. Today, she wore a simple navy dress and low heels. No makeup beyond what felt necessary. Her hair was pulled back loosely, revealing her face fully. Her hands rested on her lap, steady. She did not look like the girl who had once been locked in a freezer. When the clerk called the case, silence fell completely. Olivia stood first. Your Honor, we present evidence demonstrating that Velvet Rose Lounge operated as a front for systematic trafficking and coercion of vulnerable women, facilitated through financial protection from Councilman Richard Halpern. A murmur rippled briefly before Judge Whitman raised her hand. Proceed, she said evenly. Olivia began with the video footage. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the screen flickered on. The footage showed Veronica greeting VIP clients after 10 p.m. It showed envelopes passing hands. It showed private rooms accessed through controlled corridors. Then came the audio. Veronica's voice, clear. Ensure discretion. Thomas Avery rose immediately. Your Honor, the context of this audio is ambiguous. Judge Whitman raised a brow. You will have your opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Avery. The financial records followed. Olivia projected transaction charts, money transferred from shell companies linked to Councilman Halpern into business accounts associated with Velvet Rose. Dates aligned precisely with zoning approvals and police inspection waivers. Thomas Avery stood again, this time more aggressively. Correlation is not causation. Olivia met his gaze calmly. Pattern is not coincidence. Judge Whitman leaned slightly forward. Call your witness, she said. Olivia turned toward Amara. Ms. Johnson. Amara rose and walked to the stand. Each step felt deliberate. She took the oath. Her voice did not tremble. Olivia approached gently. Ms. Johnson, can you describe your employment at Velvet Rose? Amara described it plainly. The kitchen shifts, the forced service, the threats, the freezer. She did not embellish, she did not dramatize, she simply told the truth. And did you attempt to leave? Olivia asked. Yes. How many times? 10. A hush settled over the room. Thomas Avery approached for cross-examination. Ms. Johnson, he began smoothly, is it possible that misunderstandings occurred? That perhaps you misinterpreted hospitality expectations? Amara held his gaze. Hospitality does not require locking someone in a freezer, she replied. A flicker passed through the courtroom. Avery adjusted tactics. You continued working there for months. If conditions were as severe as you claim, why not leave sooner? The question hung heavy, one that had silenced many before her. Amara inhaled slowly. "Because fear works," she said. "Because they knew where I lived. Because they threatened others." Her eyes shifted briefly toward Veronica. "And because systems protect people like her." Veronica's composure faltered, just slightly. Olivia stood again. "Your Honor, we call additional corroboration." The screen displayed footage from a facility in another state, obtained through coordinated federal assistance once interstate evidence was presented. In the frame, a familiar face moved quickly past a hallway camera. Lena Torres. Alive. Rescued during a federal raid triggered by Amara's documentation. Gasps broke out softly in the courtroom. Judge Whitman's eyes sharpened. Moments later, a federal agent entered the courtroom and handed documentation to the clerk, confirmation that Councilman Halpern had been formally placed under investigation by federal authorities that morning. Thomas Avery stiffened. Veronica's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Judge Whitman addressed the room. "Based on the presented evidence and corroboration from federal agencies, this court finds sufficient grounds for immediate detainment pending trial." The words fell like stone. 2 federal marshals stepped forward. Veronica rose abruptly. "This is absurd!" she snapped, her voice cracking for the first time. "You think she's innocent? You think these girls aren't complicit?" Amara stood. She did not shout. She did not cry. She raised her arm and pointed directly at Veronica. "You did this," she said, voice clear enough to reach every corner of the room. "You knew exactly what you were doing." For a moment, the entire courtroom seemed suspended. Then the marshals took Veronica by the arms. Councilman Halpern's name was called into federal review proceedings. His public office announced a temporary leave pending investigation. As Veronica was escorted out, her expression shifted. Not rage, not panic. Calculation fading into realization. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Inside the courtroom, Amara sat down slowly. Her hands finally trembled, but only slightly. In Mississippi, Ruth Johnson sat upright in her hospital bed, oxygen tube resting gently beneath her nose. A nurse had propped a tablet on a rolling tray in front of her so she could watch the live stream. Tears slid down her cheeks quietly as she saw her daughter stand tall. Dr. Samuel Green stood near the doorway, arms folded gently. "She's strong," he said softly. Ruth nodded. She always was. Back in Chicago, as the courtroom emptied, a familiar figure approached quietly from the last row. Caleb Morris. He had driven overnight from Mississippi after hearing the court date announced publicly. He wore a simple blazer over a button-down shirt, still looking more farm than city, but his posture was steady. Amara turned and froze when she saw him. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I did," he replied. They did not embrace immediately. They simply stood close enough to feel less alone. Later that afternoon, federal authorities confirmed that Lena Torres and 2 other women had been safely extracted from an out-of-state property linked to Velvet Rose operations. Olivia gathered her files carefully, exhaustion finally surfacing in her posture. "It's not over," she said quietly to Amara. "But this part matters." Amara nodded. For the first time since stepping off the bus months ago, she felt something close to justice. Not revenge, not victory, justice. Veronica Blake was formally detained. Councilman Halpern was under investigation. And the truth, documented, undeniable, had been spoken aloud in open court. The official verdict came on a clear morning, washed in pale sunlight. Federal charges had moved swiftly once the investigation widened. Veronica Blake was convicted on multiple counts including trafficking, coercion, and conspiracy. Councilman Richard Halpern resigned before formal indictment, though investigations into financial corruption continued. The courtroom that had once held tension now carried resolution. Amara stood outside the courthouse holding a folded copy of the decision. The paper felt heavier than it should have. She had won. Financial compensation was ordered, substantial enough to rebuild stability. Civil damages were awarded for unlawful confinement, coercion, and emotional trauma. Reporters approached, microphones extended. "How does it feel?" one asked. Amara paused. "Like breathing after being underwater," she said quietly. She did not smile. Victory had not erased memory. In the weeks that followed, the adrenaline faded. What remained were echoes, sudden flinches at loud sounds, hesitation in narrow hallways, the way certain colognes triggered nausea. Trauma did not vanish because a judge signed an order. Olivia understood that. She recommended someone immediately. Dr. Hannah Rosen was a trauma therapist in her mid-40s, with curly auburn hair always loosely tied back and kind brown eyes behind simple round glasses. Her office felt intentionally warm. Soft lighting, neutral walls, a small gray tabby cat named Milo who often slept on the windowsill. Milo was 5 years old, rescue-born, gentle and unbothered by tears. Hannah believed healing required patience, not force. She listened more than she spoke. "You survived," Hannah told Amara during their third session. "But survival and peace are not the same." Amara nodded slowly. Back in Mississippi, Ruth Johnson was discharged from the hospital after undergoing a minor cardiac procedure to stabilize her arrhythmia. The surgery had been successful, though recovery required rest. She stood on the porch of their small wooden house the day Amara called to say she was coming home. The drive south felt different from the bus ride months ago. This time, Amara wasn't chasing something. She was returning. Caleb insisted on driving her from the airport in Jackson to Red Willow. His pickup truck looked exactly as it had before. Dust along the wheel wells, a faint crack in the windshield from an old gravel road mishap. But Caleb himself had changed subtly. His posture was firmer, his voice steadier. "You did it," he said simply as they drove past cotton fields stretching endlessly under golden sunlight. "We did it," she corrected gently. He glanced at her briefly. "I didn't stand in that courtroom." "You stood long before that," she replied. When the truck turned onto the familiar dirt road leading to her house, Amara's breath caught in her chest. The porch looked smaller than she remembered, the paint more chipped. But the door was the same. Ruth opened it before Amara could knock. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Ruth's hair seemed grayer, her shoulders slightly thinner, but her eyes, warm and steady, were unchanged. Amara stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her mother. Ruth held her tightly, careful not to strain her healing chest but firm enough to say everything words could not. "You're home," Ruth whispered. Amara inhaled the scent she had missed. Laundry soap, cotton fabric, sunlight through old wood. "I'm home," she replied. That evening, they sat at the kitchen table as the sky dimmed outside. Caleb joined them quietly, respectful of the moment. Ruth listened as Amara spoke. Not about headlines or court transcripts, but about fear. About nights spent calculating escape routes, about the weight of silence. Ruth reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "You left to find a better life," she said softly. "You found your strength instead." In the following weeks, Amara stayed in Red Willow to rest. She walked the old roads she once ran as a child. She visited the church where women hugged her tightly and men nodded with quiet pride. Some neighbors apologized for having doubted her decision to leave. Others said nothing, but their eyes carried new respect. But Amara knew something else too. Her story did not end in Mississippi. The financial settlement gave her options, and she chose carefully. She met Olivia in Chicago 1 month later in a rented office space near the river, an empty commercial unit with large windows and peeling wallpaper. The building was modest but central. "This is it?" Olivia asked, scanning the space. For now, Amara said. They stood in the middle of the empty room, sunlight pooling across worn hardwood floors. We build something here, Amara continued. Not just legal defense, support, housing referrals, counseling, documentation training. Olivia smiled faintly. You want to institutionalize resistance. I want to make sure no one walks into a place like Velvet Rose without knowing how to walk back out. They named it together, North Star Foundation. The sign was simple, white lettering on a deep blue background. No extravagance. Caleb helped drive donated furniture up from Mississippi. Old desks, filing cabinets, second-hand couches. He moved quietly through the space, assembling shelves without being asked. Chicago's loud, he said one afternoon while tightening screws on a bookshelf. So was I, Amara replied. He looked at her, and something unspoken settled comfortably between them. Olivia formally stepped away from Henderson and Bright LLP. Margaret Henderson had given her a choice, and Olivia had chosen independence. She became legal director of North Star Foundation, operating on reduced salary but greater purpose. Their first client arrived within 2 weeks. A 19-year-old girl from Indiana who had escaped an exploitative employer. She sat in the waiting room, twisting her hands nervously. Amara knelt in front of her gently. You're safe here, she said. And this time she meant it not as hope, but as infrastructure. Media attention returned briefly when North Star Foundation launched publicly. But Amara declined most interviews. This work was not performance, it was continuity. One afternoon, months later, Amara stood again outside Velvet Rose. The building was shuttered, windows dark, a notice of permanent closure taped to the door. She did not feel triumph, only closure. That evening, she boarded a flight, not to escape, but to travel between the two places she now called home. Red Willow remained her route. Chicago, her chosen ground. When she stepped off the plane back in Chicago, she walked with different posture than the girl who had arrived months before. She carried herself not as prey, but as architect. Caleb met her at the airport once more. He had decided to divide his time between Mississippi and Chicago, helping manage logistics for the foundation. You still chasing big city dreams? He teased lightly. She shook her head. I'm building something bigger than that. They drove toward the skyline, glowing against the evening sky. North Star Foundation's office lights were already on. Olivia was inside reviewing case files, glasses slipping slightly down her nose as she concentrated. Through the window, Amara saw a new client speaking softly with a volunteer counselor. The room was warm, safe, purposeful. Amara exhaled. Light had not arrived because of luck. It had not arrived because someone powerful decided to be kind. It arrived because she refused to stay silent. Because she ran 10 times. Because she documented. Because she stood in court. Because she came home and then chose to return stronger. She was no longer the naive girl who left Red Willow chasing gold under city lights. She was the woman who built a beacon in the dark. And this time, she was the one holding the door open. This story is not only about a courtroom victory. It is about what happens when an ordinary person refuses to accept silence as their destiny. In everyday life, injustice does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a job offer that feels slightly wrong. A boss who crosses boundaries. A system that tells you to be patient while it quietly protects the powerful. Many people face smaller versions of this every day at work, at school, in their communities. The lesson is not that everyone must fight a public battle. The lesson is that your voice matters, even when it shakes. Amara's journey teaches us several important truths. First, courage is not loud, it is persistent. She did not win because she was fearless. She won because she refused to give up after the 10th failure. Second, systems can fail, but people can still choose integrity. There are officers who look away, leaders who protect themselves, businesses that hide behind respectability. But there are also lawyers who step forward, neighbors who raise funds quietly, and communities that stand behind truth. Third, healing is part of justice. Winning a case does not erase trauma. In real life, success does not instantly repair emotional wounds. Education about mental health, trauma recovery, and community support is just as important as legal victory. We must teach young people not only how to chase success, but how to recognize manipulation, protect themselves, and seek help early. Fourth, never underestimate documentation and knowledge. Education is protection. Understanding your rights, keeping records, learning how systems work, these are tools that empower ordinary people. Ignorance benefits those who exploit. Awareness protects those who are vulnerable. And finally, light does not arrive because the world is kind. It arrives because someone decides not to quit. Every time you choose honesty over fear, every time you defend someone who cannot defend themselves, you become part of that light. In your own daily life, ask yourself simple questions. Do I stay silent when something is wrong because it is easier? Do I ignore someone suffering because it is inconvenient? Or do I take one small step to help? Change rarely begins with grand gestures. It begins with one decision not to look away. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs strength today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from and what lesson stayed with you the most. Your voice matters here. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue telling stories that challenge injustice and inspire courage. Together, we build awareness. Together, we build protection. Together, we build hope. May God protect everyone watching. May He give courage to those who feel trapped, wisdom to those who seek justice, and healing to those carrying invisible wounds. If you believe that perseverance brings light, and that faith can carry us through the darkest seasons, comment Amen below.